The mission was simple. Find the last rebel and end him. No emotion, no questions, no mistakes. But when she stepped through the fog, blade drawn and ready to kill, he didn't run. He looked her in the eye and said, "You're late." Why didn't he fight? Why didn't she strike? In that single moment, everything changed. What happens when a weapon begins to think, when the assassin becomes the protector? This is the story of a choice made in silence. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking this video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The mist hung low over the broken valley, thick like smoke from an ancient fire. Trees once stood here, tall and green. Now, only charred stumps reached for the sky like twisted fingers. No wind moved. No birds sang. The silence was deep and heavy, like the world had stopped breathing. Out of the fog came a shadow. She moved like water, smooth and silent. Her name was Nira. She wore dark armor tight to her frame, built not for protection, but for speed and silence. Nothing about her was loud. Even her breath was measured, quiet, steady, controlled. Her eyes, pale gray like winter stone, missed nothing. Nira was a phantom, an elite hunter forged by the Dominion. She did not question. She did not hesitate. She had one mission: locate and eliminate the last rebel survivor. His name was Terran, though she had not been told that. To her, he was only the target. The Dominion had already crushed the uprising. Cities had fallen. Forests had burned. Voices had gone silent. But one rebel remained, hidden, wounded, and dangerous. He had escaped the final sweep, killing a patrol squad with little more than instinct and a stolen blade. Too clever to leave behind, too risky to ignore. So they sent her. Nira's boots made no sound as she moved through the remains of what had once been a small outpost. Shattered concrete crumbled beneath her weight, but she did not stumble. A scanner on her wrist blinked once. Faint heat detected ahead. Her eyes narrowed. The signal was alone, heartbeat steady. No other movement. It was him. She climbed over the remains of a rusted transport vehicle and slipped through a gap in a broken wall. Inside, the room was dark, lit only by the low orange glow of a fire. The air smelled of smoke and old oil. He was there sitting against the far wall, one leg wrapped in cloth dark with blood. A small flame flickered beside him. His hands were empty. He looked up as she stepped forward. "You're later than I expected," he said. Nira stopped. She had expected a fight, a weapon, a last desperate charge. But the man didn't move. His face was calm, not afraid, not angry, just tired. She drew her blade in silence. It glinted in the firelight. "They said you'd scream," she said, voice low. He shook his head. "Then they lied to you." She hesitated. Just for a second. That voice, that tone. It reminded her of something. Someone. But the memory slipped, away like mist. "Stand," she ordered. "Can't," he replied. "My leg's done." "Then crawl." He smiled slightly. "What's your name?" She blinked. "Names are for the dead." "Then you must be very much alive." Nira stepped closer. One strike would end this. One motion, fast and clean. But her arm didn't move. "You were trained to kill," he said. "I can see it in how you stand, in how you breathe. I was a soldier once too, but I chose who I fought for." "I don't choose," she said coldly. He pointed at her chest. "Something brought you here, something made you stop just now. That's a choice." Her hand tightened on the blade. This was wrong. This was not how targets spoke. He should be begging, crying, running, not talking, not asking her questions. "What's your name?" he asked again. This time she didn't lie. "Nira." He nodded. "I'm Terran." His voice was calm, steady, honest. And it was that honesty that shook her more than any weapon could. No hate, no fear, just truth. Nira looked down at him. The mission was simple. End him. Return. Be rewarded. But something inside her wouldn't move. Slowly, she turned the blade and pressed the hilt into his chest. Taryn stared at her. "What are you doing?" "Proving them wrong," she said. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He just watched her. Nira reached into her belt and pulled out a pair of restraint bands. She clipped them to his wrists, just tight enough to hold but not to hurt. Then, without a word, she pulled him to his feet, careful with his injured leg. "What now?" he asked. "We hide," she replied. "For now." They stepped into the mist. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her wrist device still blinked. The Dominion would be watching. They would know she had failed, or worse, chosen not to kill. But for the first time in her life, Nira didn't care. In the distance, a drone buzzed above the clouds, scanning, searching. Her signal still pulsed. Taryn leaned on her shoulder as they walked. His voice was quiet. "Thank you." She didn't answer, because somewhere, buried deep, something had started to wake inside her, something the Dominion had tried to bury long ago. A feeling, not a weakness. A choice. The wind howled through the narrow cracks in the rock. Outside, the sky was still covered in thick gray mist, but down here, deep in the old tunnels beneath the ruins, the world felt quiet. A small fire burned low near the wall, its light flickering against the cold stone. The warmth barely reached the edges of the cave, but it was enough. Nira sat near the entrance, her back straight, eyes sharp. She had not spoken in hours. The blade she once held with confidence now rested on the ground beside her. Her scanner blinked slowly, still active, still traceable. They would come. It was only a matter of time. Across the fire, Taryn sat with his wrists still bound. His leg had stopped bleeding, but the pain still showed on his face. Even so, his gaze never left her. Not in fear, not in anger, only with quiet curiosity. "You don't have to keep me cuffed," he said finally. Nira didn't turn. "You're still a threat," he smiled faintly. "If I was going to hurt you, I'd have tried already." Silence fell again. Nira watched the flames, but her thoughts were far away. The mission had been clear. Find him. Kill him. Return. No mistakes. No hesitation. But here she was, sitting across from the last rebel, feeding a fire instead of ending his life. Every breath she took now felt wrong, like a betrayal. Not of the Dominion, not of her training, but of something deeper. Something she hadn't felt in years. "You're thinking too loud," Taryn said softly. "I can almost hear it." Nira turned to face him. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" He shrugged. "I was, at first. When you stepped out of the smoke, I thought it was over. But then I saw your eyes. And I knew you weren't here to kill. Me? Not anymore." Nira frowned. "You're wrong." "Maybe," he said. "But you had the chance, and you didn't take it." She stood and paced near the cave entrance. Her boots made small sounds on the dusty floor. She stopped and looked out into the mist, scanning for movement. "Nothing yet. I have ended rebels before," she said. "I have silenced traitors, crushed uprisings, and yet I'm still breathing," Taryn said. "Why?" Nira didn't answer right away. Her hands clenched into fists, then slowly relaxed. She turned back toward him. "They trained me to see you as less than human," she said quietly. "Dangerous, wild, something to be erased. And now?" he asked. She sat down across from him again, but this time closer. Her voice dropped, softer than before. "Now I don't know." The fire cracked gently. Taryn shifted, wincing as pain shot through his leg. Nira reached into her pack and pulled out a med patch. Without a word, she knelt beside him and unwrapped the cloth around his wound. The skin underneath was red and swollen. "You're helping me now?" he asked, surprised. "You'll die from infection if I don't." He watched her apply the Patch. It hissed softly as it sealed the wound and released the medicine. Your hands are gentle, he whispered. Neera pulled away quickly, like his words had burned her. Don't mistake mercy for weakness, she said. I don't, he replied. I see strength, the kind they tried to bury in you. She turned her back to him, staring into the fire. Her chest felt tight, not from fear, not from anger, from something she couldn't name. Tell me something, he said. Anything. About you. Why? She asked without turning. Because you're not just a weapon. You're a person. I want to know who you really are. Neera stayed silent for a long time. Her whole life had been missions, drills, codes. No one had ever asked her that before, not even once. But the silence felt heavier than his question. So she spoke. I was taken when I was 3, she said. From my home. They called it selection. I don't remember my parents. I don't remember the place, just shadows and voices. And your name? He asked. They called me Subject 21, she said. My real name? It was Solon. I remembered it just now. Only just now. Terran smiled gently. Solon. That's a good name. She didn't smile back, but her eyes softened. Outside, the scanner blinked again. This time faster. Patrols were coming. Neera stood, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade. But she didn't reach for it. Not yet. They'll find us soon, she said. Terran looked up at her. Then what will you do? Neera didn't answer. She didn't know. But deep inside, something was changing. Not quickly, not loudly, but it was there. A question she had never dared to ask. A choice she had never been allowed to make. The sky above was empty and pale, like a faded painting left too long in the sun. The mist had lifted just enough to reveal the broken bones of the world. Shattered towers, crumbled roads, machines rusted and half-buried in ash. Silence followed every step they took. Neera led the way, her eyes scanning for movement. Her wrist device blinked every few seconds, warning her they were still being tracked. Behind her, Terran limped, each step careful and slow. She had removed his restraints hours ago. He hadn't run. They moved through a narrow canyon of stone and steel, a place where nature had begun to take back what the war left behind. Small, plants grew between cracks. Even here, life tried. How far is this place? Terran asked, breathing hard. Not far now, Neera replied. Old transport tunnels, deep underground. It's off the grid. You sound like you've been there before. I have, she said. During training, we used it as a hiding ground. It was forgotten even by most of the Dominion. Tareen nodded but said nothing more. He didn't need to. His silence was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of thought. Soon, they reached a pile of collapsed stone near a bent power line tower. Neera stopped, knelt, and moved aside some broken metal. Underneath was a hatch, covered in dust and time. She pressed her palm against a rusted panel. The lock sparked once, then clicked open. Go, she said. He looked at her. After you. She hesitated, then dropped down the ladder first. The tunnel below was dark, damp and filled with stale air. Old lights flickered along the walls. Terran followed, slow but steady. When his feet hit the ground, Neera closed the hatch behind them. For a long while they walked without speaking. Their footsteps echoed down the narrow path. Here, beneath the surface, the world above felt far, away. No drones, no signals, just quiet. Finally, they reached an old shelter room built into the tunnel wall. Cracked screens and empty crates were scattered around. A few emergency lights still glowed. Rest here, she said. I'll check the perimeter. You still don't trust me, he said, sitting down against the wall. I don't trust anyone, she replied, then stepped back into the hallway. But when she returned a few minutes later, he hadn't moved. He just sat there watching the faint flicker of the lights on the ceiling. I've been in places like this before, he said softly. We hid in places like this during the first wave, cold, hungry, always listening for the sound of boots. Nira didn't reply. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Did you believe everything they taught you? He asked. I didn't think, she answered. I followed. But now you think. She nodded slowly. Now I do. He looked at her, his voice quiet. I never thought someone like you would help someone like me. I didn't help you, she said quickly. I made a choice. It wasn't about you. That's not true, he said. You could have walked away. You didn't. Nira looked at him for a long time. Then she sat down across from him, resting her back against the wall. Why did you keep fighting? She asked. He closed his eyes for a moment. Because I remembered what it felt like to be free, and I couldn't accept a world where people were told not to feel, not to hope. I didn't fight because I thought we'd win. I fought because giving up felt worse. The room fell silent again. Nira looked down at her hands. They had ended many lives. They had held blades, fired weapons, written reports that sealed fates. But now they trembled slightly. They took everything from me, she said. Even my name. I wasn't allowed to remember. I wasn't allowed to dream. But now you do, Taryn said. Nira nodded. I remembered it. Solon. That was my name before they took me. It's a beautiful name, he said. They sat together, in the quiet. The tunnel around them creaked now and then, old steel shifting with age, but it was still safer here than anywhere above. A light on her scanner blinked again. This time red. They're close, she said. How close? Less than 2 hours. Taryn sat up straighter. Then we need to move. Nira shook her head. You can't run. Not with your leg. And they'll be watching the exits. Then what's your plan? Nira pulled out a small device from her belt. It looked like a stone, but when pressed, it opened to reveal a signal jammer. This will block them for a short time, she said, long enough for us to move deeper. What happens after that? She looked at him, eyes calm. We keep going. One step at a time. Taryn smiled faintly. You've changed. No, she said. I've remembered who I was. Outside, the walls the world still hunted them. But down here beneath the hollow sky they had found something more powerful than fear. They had found a reason to keep walking. The deeper they moved into the tunnels, the colder the air became. Dust clung to every surface, and their footsteps echoed like whispers through forgotten halls. Old symbols marked the walls, reminders of a time before the Dominion. Time itself felt strange here, as if the world above had stopped moving. Nira led Taryn through narrow paths lit only by the soft glow of her wrist scanner. The red signal still pulsed slowly. The Dominion had not given up. They were closing in. They reached an old chamber once used to store supplies. Now it was empty, except for rusted crates and torn canvas. Nira stopped and placed a small light on the ground. Taryn leaned against the wall, catching his breath. They'll find this place soon, she said quietly. Taryn nodded. I know. She crouched and pulled out the jammer device. I can trigger this again. It will block their scans for a few minutes, but after that, we're out of places to hide, he finished. Nira didn't speak for a moment. Her fingers traced the edge of the device, but her mind was somewhere else. They'll mark me as a traitor, she said finally. I'll be hunted like you. You already are, Taryn replied. She looked up at him. I never thought I'd be the one running. You're not running, he said. You're choosing. Those words stayed with her. They sounded simple, but they carried weight. She had spent her life obeying orders, moving like a shadow, never asking why, but now every step, every word was her own. I don't regret it, she said. Me neither, Taryn answered. A low hum began to grow in the distance. Nira stood, her eyes narrowing. The scanner flashed brighter now, multiple signals. Drones, scouts, they had entered the tunnels. They're here, she said, Taryn pulled himself upright. He reached for a pipe on the wall to steady himself. How many? Too many, she said. You won't make it if we fight. Then don't fight, he said. Leave me. You can still escape. Neera didn't respond. She walked to the wall and looked up at the dark ceiling. Metal pipes ran through it, old and unused. For a moment she thought of her training, her instructors, the silence that was drilled into her every day. She remembered the reward for obedience, the punishment for hesitation, but none of that mattered now. She turned back to Taryn. No, I'm not leaving you. He opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. Something in her eyes had changed. The quiet in her voice was no longer cold, it was calm. Certain. There's one more path, she said, pointing toward a small door near the floor. An emergency shaft. I'll block the others and lead the patrol away. They'll catch you, he said. Maybe, she replied. But it will buy you time. Taryn stepped forward, wincing. Don't do this for me. I'm not, she said. I'm doing it for the part of me that never had a choice. Now I do. He didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small chip. It glowed faintly. Take this, he said. It holds everything I know. Maps, safe zones, old rebel contacts. If they get me, this survives. Neera hesitated, then took it. I'll make sure it does. They stood in silence for a moment. Then, without another word, she activated the jammer. The signal dropped. The scanner went dark. She turned and walked back the way they came, boots light on the dusty floor. Taryn watched until she disappeared, into the tunnel. As she moved, she felt the fear rise inside her, but she didn't let it control her. Instead, she welcomed it. Fear meant she was still human, still alive. At a junction, she stopped and placed a timed charge on the wall. It wouldn't destroy the tunnel, but it would cause a collapse, enough to slow the patrol. The hum of drones grew louder. They were near. Neera looked down the path, then pressed the trigger. The wall exploded in a wave of dust and stone. She turned and ran, heart pounding, each breath sharp and real. This time she wasn't running from orders or failure. She was running toward something. Freedom. Above the ground, the sky had begun to shift. The mist faded just enough to let a pale beam of light through. It touched the ground softly, like a promise. Somewhere beneath that sky, Taryn climbed through the shaft, limping but alive. He looked back once, then forward. He didn't know where the path would lead, but he walked anyway. Far behind him, deep in the earth, Neera crouched in the dark, surrounded by silence. But she no longer feared it. In that silence, she had made her choice. Not to obey, not to destroy. To protect. To feel. To live. And somewhere inside her, in the place they tried to bury, a name whispered back into the light. Solon.